Our next speaker needs no introduction. As Suffolk County's highest-ranking law enforcement official, Suffolk County Sheriff Dr. Errol D. Toulon Jr. is working to serve and protect the county's 1.5 million residents through innovative programs to reduce crime and recidivism and create transparent fiscal policies. He is highly focused on using data analytics and technological assets to capture crime patterns, which are used to uncover trends like drug dealing in local neighborhoods and the movement of international gangs encroaching into parts of Suffolk County. Sheriff Toulon has more than 30 years of criminal justice experience, heavily centered upon corrections intelligence and combating gang violence. Prior to serving as Suffolk County Sheriff, he worked for 25 years with the New York City Department of Correction, beginning his career as a New York City Correction Officer and culminating as the Deputy Commissioner of Operations. Please help me welcome your host for this Executive Leadership Conference, Suffolk County Sheriff Dr. Errol D. Toulon Jr.
Oh. Thanks, Paul. Thank you. I have a little bit of a cold, so please excuse my voice. I should say cold, it's really allergies. So it's your reaction to adversity, not the adversity itself, that determines how your life's story will develop. And I can tell you that this quote is so true with my life, and I'll get into that. My parents are going to celebrate their 60th wedding anniversary on Thursday, and they really worked hard to provide a really good background and foundation for my brother and I, and more importantly, in education. We went to a Catholic grammar school, and then I wound up going to a all-boys Catholic high school in the South Bronx. And it really was during my junior and senior year as a high school student where I really learned and saw some adversity. I was, in 1979, a bat boy for the New York Yankees. And during that time, it was very tumultuous. The Yankees had just come off back-to-back World Series championships. It's me and Reggie. And they had just come off back-to-back World Series championships, and they were predicted to win a third one, a three-peat, well before Pat Riley coined that phrase, three-peat. But as many of you, if you do remember or don't remember, in April of 1979, Goose Gossage, who was the closer, and Cliff Johnson, who was the backup catcher, got into a little scuffle in the shower area, and Gossage hurt his wrist. He had surgery, and he was out for most of the season. And being a bat boy, a young kid, a 17-year-old kid, in with the New York Yankees, you know, this storied franchise of professional baseball, wearing the pinstripes, you started to see a change in the dynamics of just the way the players reacted. Now, when you walked into the Yankee locker room, when I was a young kid as a bat boy, and you saw all the lockers, and you saw that interlocking NY in the center of the clubhouse, with Reggie's locker in that corner locker to the left, and you had Greg Nettles in that corner locker to the right. The last locker on the left-hand side before you went into the training room was Thurman Munson's, and then the last locker on the right-hand side before you went into the players' lounge was Catfish Hunter. You can see the dynamics, and you can see the way players were acting, and you knew it was something different. When Thurman Munson walked into that clubhouse, you can tell that he was the captain. Just like any of you, wherever you work, when you know that someone is a leader and not just a boss because they have a title, walks in, you can tell that that person is well respected. And no matter what time of the day, because at all times, most of the starters always arrive 45 minutes before game time. Most of those that were subbing came in an hour and a half for batting practice and infield. During that 79 season, me and Billy Martin, during that 79 season, we started the season with Bob Lemon as the manager. And in the middle of the season, Yankees weren't doing that well, so they fired Bob Lemon and brought back Billy Martin. And Billy Martin had already been with the Yankees twice before. And so they were hoping that he would revive that team and bring them back to their storied, the 2 years that they had won. So Bob Lemon's gone. So now as a 17-year-old, I'm watching a manager leave. I'm watching a new manager come in. I'm watching players, because when players go on streaks, you know, we think about it. You know what? Errol Toulon's 0 for 30 in his last at bat, so he's throwing wild pitches at Citi Field. That's a joke. I threw out Citi. Most of you saw it, so you can laugh. So, you know, when you see, you know, these professional athletes on the hinge of their careers because they know that if they go on a long streak, there's someone in that locker room ready to take their job. Watching players get traded and coming back, or new players coming to the Yankees, worried about their jobs. 17 years of age, as I say to you again, I'm starting to understand, what real life is and how you have to perform when you're given that opportunity. In June, I believe it was June of '79, Bobby Mercer returns back to the New York Yankees. And I'll tell you a quick story. So Mercer returns back to the New York Yankees, and I'm walking around the clubhouse because my father was a warden on Rikers Island. And he said, Errol, don't come home unless you have autographed baseball. So, of course, me being fearful of Dad, made sure that every day I came home with an autographed baseball. So this one day, probably in late July, maybe early August, I'm walking around the Yankee clubhouse, and this is the one time I have every single player. Usually there are players in the training room, you don't go inside and bother them. There are players on the field giving interviews, you don't go on the field. But this one time I had everybody, including the manager, all the coaches, and the last person was Thurman Munson. So I go over to Thurman's locker, and I said, Thurman, can you sign the ball for me? And he says, nah, kid, not right now. So I walk away a little dejected, and Bobby Mercer, who has just been traded back to the team, is 2 lockers over from Thurman, says, Thurman, sign the ball for the kid. So Thurman says, come here, kid, and he takes the ball, and he signs it for me. And I really believe that's one of the last balls that Thurman Munson signed, because they wound up going on a road trip, had a day off. He got in a plane to go to Canton to visit his family, and he never returned. He perished in a plane crash. So Thurman dies. And now you start to see a new adversity in this team. Now, many of you could see the footage, you can read the newspapers, but to be in that locker room, watching Lou Piniella, Greg Nettles, Catfish Hunter, in tears, broadcasters losing their, talking about the Yankee captain being lost. I started to see a new type of adversity. And I'm, like I said now, I'm still 17 years of age. Never experienced anything like this. And now Thurman is gone. So the Yankees lost, I think it was the White Sox. We're in. We lost a couple of games to them. And then when the Orioles came in, Mr. Steinbrenner declared that if we didn't come back from Thurman's funeral, then we would just forfeit the game. And he was a terrific leader. He was someone that you wanted to admire because he was someone who would be the first one to get in your face, but he'd be the next one to put his arm around you and give you a second chance, as you saw with Dwight Gooden and Darryl Strawberry. I was very fortunate to be around this team, not just as a young kid watching what occurs with these New York Yankees, but getting life lessons from players that not only I admired, but seeing what they were doing right and what they were doing wrong, and realizing how critical it is to be detail-oriented, to be someone that's going to focus on the mission on what you have to do. These players, we see them because the games were 8 o'clock back then, not 7 o'clock like they are right now. These players arriving at noon, 1 o'clock, and I'm sure Perry Williams will be able to expand on a lot more of the life of a professional athlete. But from a young kid, watching them hone their craft at such an early age, made me realize that you just don't go to work and then go home and that's the end of your job. Depending on your position, you have to prepare for it. You're going to have to put in the extra hours, and you're going to have to spend a lot of time, possibly away from your family, doing things that's going to make you or your organization the best that they can be. So we go to Canton, Ohio for Thurman's funeral, and we get back in time. And I'll never forget, it was a misty rain. The Yankees take the field. They leave home plate empty. Thurman's picture's on the scoreboard. The fans are yelling, Thurman, Thurman, Thurman. We wound up winning 5-4 with Bobby Mercer, collecting all 5 RBIs, a double in the bottom of the 9th that won the game. And so, 17-year-old kid going through all that, I was fortunate enough to come back for the 1980 season. I still can't get a damn ring because they lost that season too. But they fired Billy Martin. So now I see 3 managers in 2 years. And now Dick Hauser, who was the third base coach at the time, not third base coach with the Yankees, but third base coach previously because he had coached with Florida State and came back and they made him the manager. Win 103 games, the most in the American League that particular season. And then we fly out to Kansas City. So just say real quick, after Thurman died, we started standing on the top step of the dugout, myself, next to Yogi, Billy, Mike Ferraro, Charlie Lau, and the second to last is Tommy John. I'm sure most of you have heard of Tommy John surgery. So we're on a plane going to Kansas City. It's me, Goose Gossage, yes, another hairstyle. And Ray Negron. Many of you may know Ray because he has two sons that work in the Suffolk County Police Department in the 6th Precinct. And I'm thinking, you know what, we got Gossage back, Reggie's playing. We're going to win this whole thing. And so we're on a plane, we get to Kansas City. Of course, we lose games 1 and 2. Now we're flying back to New York. I'm still believing, they're going to win. Game 3, I'm a ball boy down the right field line because you have 3 responsibilities as a bat boy. One game, you're the bat boy. The second game, you're the ball boy that brings balls back and forth to the umpire. And in the third game, you're the ball boy down the right field line. And so I'm down the right field line. It's the 7th inning. We're up. Brett's up at bat. Gossage is at the plate. 3-run homer in the upper deck. And I'm sitting there on the stool, and I'm watching this ball sail into the upper deck, realizing that my career as a bat boy, this young thing that I always wanted to do, was over. So another adversity. That's over. And then when you're, I'm sure Perry will talk about this, when you used to walk into Yankee Stadium, people are cheering for you. You receive this adulation, not because of you, but because of the status of the position you held. And so I went from that, I think it was October 4th of 1980, walking out of Yankee Stadium as a bat boy for the New York Yankees that people always wanted to talk to now Errol, who's a freshman in college. And so let's fast forward. So I finished, I got a degree at community college, Kingsborough in Brooklyn, and I followed my father's footsteps and into the Department of Correction. I was very fortunate. I was got to a point where I was an officer in our emergency service unit, got promoted, came back, and now I'm a supervisor. And during those late 1980s, early 1990s on Rikers Island, we had almost 25,000 individuals in our custody. So much so we had to purchase 3 prison barges from England. We built a jail in Fort Bell for extra, because of the female overload. The Brooklyn house was open. Many of you remember the Bronx house that was open near Yankee Stadium. That was there. The Queens House of Detention, Brooklyn House of Detention, all facilities that are no longer there. And we had hostage situations. We had gun jobs. Guns were snuck into the jails. Inmates were shooting inmates. We had disturbances. We had escapes. And being part of emergency service as a young captain, because I was 28 years of age, supervising men and women in all these type of incidents, because we all know vicariously that if any of them were to screw up, or if any of my staff members were to screw up, basically everything falls on me. And so those leadership, it was very important that I had a very good role model to enter that Department of Correction. And so that was my dad. My dad taught me, it's my brother to the left of all of you, my dad in the middle, and that's me on the right-hand side. He taught me, he says, you have to take care of the men and women that work for you. He goes, they're going to make mistakes, but you have to, 1, minimize those mistakes, but more importantly, help them so they don't make those mistakes again. And you're going to get lazy staff, and you're going to get some really good staff. And so I remember him telling me a story one day. He walked in, my father, taught me well. He liked to walk all the jails, and he worked in one of the biggest jails that had almost 2,700 inmates just in that jail. And he said he walked in a housing area, he was a deputy warden, and he saw 2 correctional officers sitting in a housing area, and they're playing chess, and no one's watching the inmates. Now, easily could have had them suspended, could have made their lives miserable. So my father just took the 2 queens and said, let me know how you finish the game. And so I thought to myself, as I moved through various leadership positions, on how am I going to not only inspire or motivate staff, but make them realize that sometimes the behavior that they have may not be the appropriate behavior for that organization. So as I said, young officer in emergency service, probably one of the proudest moments of my young life, because there's so much activity that's going on. And being able to learn so much more from an emergency management standpoint. It's probably one of the biggest smiles you ever see, because later on in the Department of Correction, there was no smiles for me, basically, when I was there. When we were in the emergency service unit, one other opportunity was moving most of the high-risk inmates. So anybody that had some sort of notoriety, if there was someone that killed a police officer, if there was someone that was a high Colombian drug dealer. So from the killers of Eddie Burns to John Gotti to Colombian drug dealers, we had to move, sometimes with the assistance of the New York City Police Department. But a few months after this picture was taken, I started developing some symptoms. I started developing night sweats. I wasn't eating. My uniform was hanging off of me. And I thought, you know what, I'm just working too hard. And I decided to go to the doctor, and I was diagnosed with cancer, Hodgkin's lymphoma. My kids were in grammar school at the time. And I didn't think I was going to see my boys graduate from grammar school. And they started an aggressive treatment of chemotherapy and radiation. Chemo went for several months. Radiation, they actually had to stop because I had a 9.3 centimeter mass in my chest. I had cancer all in my throat, my lymph nodes, and I couldn't swallow after the radiation. It actually looked like I was on a barbecue grill after the 5th week because I was so burnt from so much radiation. But luckily, I started to get better and was able to get back to work. And life changes because now, it's a new adversity as an adult, trying to raise a family and not being able to work the overtime that most of us like to work when we're, in the junior ranks of any organization to support yourself and your family. Then I got transferred when I got back to work to the Firearms and Tactics Unit at the New York City Police Range. And an adversity that we all faced, our country faced, was the terrorist attacks of September 11th. Not only in New York City, but the Pentagon and the plane that went down in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. And my role was very minimal because I was one of many supervisors at the New York City Police Range. And because no one knew what was going on, we had to secure the range because of all the ammunition and all the firearms that were located there. We weren't sure where's the target. And if any of you have ever been to that range, you know how vulnerable that target is because it's just a fenced-in area. But then shortly after this, I started getting sick again. My doctor said that she wanted to send me for a PET scan. It was a relatively new test, late December of 2002. And so she sent me for a PET scan, and she called me up the very next day, and she says, I need you to go to the hospital. I said, what's wrong? She says, there's a mass on the head of your pancreas. And I said, all right, what does that mean? She goes, we believe you have pancreatic cancer. So I'm like, oh boy, pancreatic cancer. I know that that's one of the most incurable of the cancers that are out there. So I called my wife at the time, and I told her what was occurring. She came with me to the hospital, and I had to go into the city for various tests. And one hospital in New York City told me that they had to do a procedure called a Whipple procedure, which is going to be about 10.5 hours long, removing the head of the pancreas, the gallbladder, part of my stomach, part of my small intestine, and resectioning everything. So I decided, let me go for a second opinion. So I went for a second opinion, and they concurred with that. So I had the surgery done on Long Island, and it was a successful surgery, except for 6 weeks after it, I'm home, and I start getting sick again. And now I don't know what's going on. I have jaundice, my weight loss is coming back, and my urine is discolored. So I go back to the hospital, and now they tell me that I need a liver transplant because I have a disease called primary sclerosing cholangitis, which is a disease that Walter Payton, the Hall of Fame football player, passed away from. So now I'm thinking to myself, crap. I can't say what I want to say, but crap. 6 weeks ago, they told me I have pancreatic cancer. Now they're telling me I have primary sclerosing cholangitis. I need a liver transplant within a year. Fast forward now, we're in April of 2003, getting close to Easter. And I'm sitting in my den, I'm looking through the blinds, and I am just ready to go. I'm praying to God, just please take me. I cannot deal with this pain anymore. I can't deal with going to the hospitals. Just please take me. So I start getting sick again. And my wife at the time takes me back to the hospital, and they inserted they had to insert a catheter in me and a PICC line in my arm. They inserted the catheter incorrectly. while I'm waiting for this liver transplant. They inserted the catheter incorrectly. So I'm getting sick again, go back to the hospital, and they find out that they inserted it incorrectly, and they reinserted, they have the PICC line in. Now I'm home receiving antibiotics, 6 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock at night. Somehow again, I start getting better. And I decided now I have to retire from the department. It's 2004. They were gracious enough to let me run out. We had unlimited sick. No one bothered me because, Captain Toulon was a decent guy. And no one bothered me. I guess they thought that I was going to die and my wife can get the active benefits as opposed to the retired benefits. But now I'm getting better, and I'm like, crap, I'm a captain. I have a lot of certificates from emergency service. I have an associate's degree. How am I going to support my family? I'm still recovering from an illness. I did not look that good. So I went back to school, and I got my bachelor's degree, got my master's degree, started a second master's degree, and then decided, I want to pursue a doctorate in education because I want to be a teacher. I think with all my illnesses, at least I could teach and at least regulate my schedule. But the problem was my second master's degree in Homeland Security Management at Long Island University, in order for me to complete my studies to get an advanced certificate, would mean that I would have to be at Dowling College, where I started my doctoral program, and LIU simultaneously. So I'm in two schools doing two different courseworks at the same time so I can get the advanced certificate and then start on my pursuit of my doctorate. And so 2011, I graduate. 2012, County Executive Toulon hires me as his Assistant Deputy County Executive for Public Safety. And while I've been a resident of Lake Grove for 31 years, it gave me a great opportunity to understand what's going on here in Suffolk County. From Montauk to Amityville, got to talk to constituents, and got to understand a lot of people. At the time, September 2013, I was married 29 years. My wife and I actually met in jail. She was a correction officer on Rikers Island. And she suffered from lupus, also fibromyalgia, and also the lung disease, smoking, emphysema. Thank you, Commissioner. So she had those three illnesses, and so I go to work, go to county exec's office, and around lunchtime I texted her to see how she was doing. She had retired after 14 years because of her lupus. And I went to lunch. I went to lunch with the acting president of Dowling College because Dowling was considering starting a criminal justice program. And I wanted to be part of that program because that was my goal, was to be a teacher, to be an educator. And so I had a great meeting and got back to the office and realized, oh, wow, Sue didn't text me back. So I texted her. She didn't answer. I called. Didn't answer. And so I called my future daughter-in-law, who was a nurse at the time up here. And I said, can you stop by the house? Sue's not answering the phone. So she went to the house. She called me back. She said, I see your dog. I had a pit bull. He's pacing in the foyer, but she's not answering. So I said, okay. Grabbed my jacket, flew down 347, went home. So I met my future daughter-in-law at the door, and we go inside, and I start calling her name throughout the house, looking for her. And so she didn't answer, and walked the entire first floor, and then decided to go upstairs. And I'll never forget the picture because every bedroom door was closed. My boys still lived at home. They were in their early 20s. And our bedroom was at the end of the hallway. So I'm calling her, open up the bedroom door. I'm praying that she's just sleeping, because sometimes she did just take an extensive nap during the day. And I open up the bedroom door, and I say, Sue, and she's not in bed. So the master bedroom door is closed. And just before I open the door, I call her name one last time and open up the door, and that's where I found her. So naturally, it's another adversity that I had to contend with. Calling my sons and telling them that they have to come home, and then explain to them that their mother is not here anymore. But somehow, through God's grace, we were able to make it through that. And the staff in the county exec's office, Suffolk County Police Department, were extremely supportive during probably the most devastating time in my life. Something I gladly deal with cancer twice again. I should say that when I was pursuing a school, that I started getting sick again. And so I got rushed to the hospital. I found I had an illness called a cardiac tamponade. And so our hearts normally pump like this. And the cardiac tamponade, the fluid encompasses your pericardial sac. So they had to rush me into the ER and cut open and put a pericardial window in my heart. So I've gladly taken that 2 rounds of cancer, including pancreatic cancer, to not live that again. But as I said, the county exec's office was extremely supportive. I was able to go back to work and somehow make it through each day, trying to figure out how I was going to have this new life. And then I got this great opportunity to return back to New York City Department of Correction. I say great opportunity because I believe that the New York City Department of Correction is one of the finest correctional agencies in the country. It may have its challenges, whether it's in the 1960s when my father started or in the 2000s when I came back. And so I came back and was given a tremendous amount of responsibilities. And I often feel that those are the responsibilities that prepared me for the position I'm currently in. But as life goes, sometimes you have convictions and things that you stand on. And there was a great deal of trepidation with a lot of things that were going on in the department. There was some leadership that was, and I'm sure there's some people here, both past and present, that could probably attest to some of the things. But in January of 2017, I'm asked to resign. So now I'm like, damn. Deputy commissioner, or former deputy commissioner now. I have a doctorate in education. I think I'm a good person. I think I was trying to do the right thing. And now I'm asked to resign. I have no job. No job for all of 2017. So much so that in June or July of 2017, I was in a Wendy's in St. James, and they had a help wanted sign. And I seriously thought about applying for a job. Even with all the credentials, I knew I needed to work. I'd accumulated all that student loan debt that I told you all about. But I didn't put in for it. But I got home, and I called my mother every single day since 1996, when I was first diagnosed with cancer. I called my mother and father every single day. And I said, Mom, you know what? I'm thinking about putting in for a sales position at Wendy's. And she said, you know what, Errol? In her clairvoyant way, I feel like something good's going to happen to you. You know, why don't you wait until the fall? So we all know that in the fall of 2017, there was a primary I was asked to run. Somehow, by God's grace, I was leading on election day and then declared the winner in December of 2017. And took over an office that I take a lot of great pride in right now, being the sheriff, but never did I think in 2020 will life be so difficult for all of us, where we had, the first was the bail reform legislation, which changed everything for all of us, especially those of us that are in correction, and then also in our communities. You know, because the courts and the legislation didn't assist any individuals that were released from our custody. All it did was just say go, but not go with help, not go and mandate that you report here and report back to the judge that you went to some mandated service. And then March, COVID. May, social unrest. We're seeing staff members retire at record numbers. We're watching staff members get sick. And how do we deal with all that? How, you know, the first thing that I was very blessed with was to have a very, very good team around me. You know, people when I couldn't make a good decision or a decision at all, that I could sit down and talk to them and get everybody's input. And there are some times where I'll walk around and I'll speak to correction officers, I'll speak to deputy sheriffs, I'll speak to our civilian personnel, and I'll say, well, what do you think? because I think everybody's input and voice in our organization is extremely important. I don't know it all. I'm just the one that's going to take the fall or the blame when things go wrong. I think that as a leader, there are several things that I've learned. One is I have to remain calm. I can't get upset, because if I get upset, everybody's going to see it. So I have to get upset behind closed doors. I knew walking in that I wanted to have a vision and not be afraid. If this was going to be a 4-year term, or if it's going to be a 4-year term, then so be it. I know for 4 years I did the best job that I could for the people of Suffolk County and for the staff at the Sheriff's Office, whether they think so or not. I try to pay attention to detail, because it's very, very important. Because if you start to lose the details, then you're going to start to lose the whole picture. And so I'm very, very tough sometimes on my staff regarding, even if it's just uniforms, your jackets being buttoned, your hair being up. You know, you're looking presentable, because you represent not only yourself, you represent an organization, and you represent a county. Of course, there's always an element of luck to everything that we do. You know, listen, I don't survive heart surgery, cancer twice, the tragic death of a wife, unemployment for a year without a little bit of luck. You know, sometimes you have to make your way through that, and you have to make sure that you're prepared for when that opportunity presents itself. But you have to be able to be prepared for when that lucky opportunity comes about. And then the last thing, and this was something that Willie Randolph had said to me when I was a bat boy. I forgot why I was upset. And, you know, they put the bat boys' lockers right next to Reggie, because after every game, of course, all the reporters would go over to Reggie and want to get some sort of story from him. So they put us by him, because they knew that, you know, we wouldn't be in our lockers after a game, because we were helping the clubhouse men. And he told me, try not to get upset over things you can't control. There's just some things that are just beyond our control. You know, we try to do the best job we can. We try to do the right thing. And sometimes we're going to lose a game. Sometimes we're just not going to be successful. Sometimes maybe it's not our turn. So final, you know, this quote from General MacArthur: a true leader has the confidence to stand alone, the courage to make tough decisions, and the compassion to listen to the needs of others. He or she does not set out to be a leader, but becomes one by the equality of his actions and the integrity of his intent. I thank all of you for listening to me, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Sheriff, I have a question for you. I know that you have you talk a lot about having mentors in your life, and I know a lot of, you know, through the Yankees and through your dad in corrections and all that stuff. How important is it for everyone, including leaders, new leaders, having that mentor that they can look up to?
Well, I think it's extremely important. So in the picture with me and Goose Gossage and Ray Negron was a mentor to me when I was a bat boy. You know, you're a 17-year-old kid not knowing what's going on in this organization. You know what's going on, but you don't understand adult personalities and then adult elite athletes and what they're going through because of the, it wasn't millions like it is now, but they are making a decent living. And so you don't understand the dynamics. Even now today, I have 3 people that I consider mentors that I talk to mostly about professional issues and things on how to approach things, not from a political standpoint, but just from a personal standpoint on what's the best way to do things and a very pragmatic way of trying to do the best that you can do. You know, I try, at least when I'm walking around, I rather our staff tells me what I want to hear and not what they think I want to know. Because anybody can say, oh, yes, sir, how you doing, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir. You know, that doesn't do me any good. But if there's an issue that maybe is not working its way up the chain that a staff member is faced with, we're not going to be able to change it and make their jobs easier. You know, we have a hard enough job, but if there are different policies that are in place that maybe need to be tweaked to make the job maybe not easier, but make it more manageable for our staff. And you know, while you know COVID's a difficult circumstance for us to be where we want to be when it comes to talking our staff, I just find it very important, whether it's you know walking in district court, to walking through Yaphank, to walking through our PIB, to walking through our academy to talk to the staff and see, what's going on, what technology, what training do we need, what's going on with our inmate population, and what challenges are you faced with, are the things that, I prefer to hear so that we can try and make it more manageable for our staff.
Can I speak to you about wellness?
Sure.
We're starting stuff with wellness in the sheriff's office, but as you went through this amazing story of adversity, were there times where you would take a moment to take care of yourself going through? I mean, obviously, through cancer, you took care of yourself, but when you're dealing with all of the responsibilities put on you when you went back to the Department of Correction, when you're dealing with the loss of your wife, what kind of things did you do to make sure that you were staying healthy?
Well, the first thing was prayer, but more importantly, I had to have a belief. I had to take care of my sons. I knew that, I just tried to make it one day at a time because literally I just could not, out of some of those occurrences that I explained earlier, it was extremely difficult to try and manage to get to the next day. And the last thing, of course, was that unemployment for a year. I mean, for the first 2 weeks, you would have thought I looked like Tom Hanks in Castaway, because the only time I got out of bed was to let the dog out, feed the dog, let the dog back in, and then that was it. I got right back in bed because depression had set in. I was kind of in a quandary as to how, someone that I think is, I'm not a perfect person, but I think I'm a good person, could be in a situation now where you're unemployed with all these bills at 50-something years of age. Who the hell is going to hire me at 50-something years of age? I didn't think it'd be the people of Suffolk County, that's for sure. And the only reason why I ran was because I thought it was free advertising, because no one, up until July when I thought about putting in Wendy's, was looking to hire me. So I said, you know what? This would be a great opportunity for free advertising. Maybe there's someone will like my smile, they'll like my resume, or they'll like something I had to say, and they'll say, you know what, give this guy a job.
Sheriff, is there anything you think adversity has taught you that victory or triumph has not?
The one thing it has taught me is to just really do the best I can and leave everything on the table. I think it's important that, I feel like I've given everything I could in every organization I worked in. Now, more so as the leader of an organization, because everybody looks to you. You can't yell the way you might yell if you were a line staff. You can't say certain things that you may want to say when you're a line staff. And I think through certain adversities, and I've had different ones, my health, so I have to be very cognizant of my health concerns. My mental health, because, when you lose your spouse after 29 years, and we had just celebrated our 29th anniversary the month before she passed. And then being unemployed. I faced 3 different things, so now I won't spend a penny. I'm not gonna lie. Being unemployed for a year for the first time since I was 14 years of age has taught me, like, hey, you know what? It's no longer like, you know what? I'll buy it and I'll pay it off, or I'll pay it. No, and these are the things that I had to learn as a 50-something-year-old man, that sometimes I hope that the 20s and 30s will learn and never have to go through some of the things, that I had to.
Yeah.
I was an assistant chief in the New York City Department of Corrections. We lost one of the best ones, and I never understood it. He's being very humble. He was an amazing asset to the New York City Department of Corrections, and whoever made that decision to let him go, you could see which way the department went since he left. Many times, I've been also appointed to the Board of Corrections by Mayor de Blasio, and First Deputy Commissioner Richards will testify that I've said several times, when we were having problems with visits and programs, I said, what we have to do is just reach out to Sheriff Toulon, and what is he doing? Because he had visits going, he had programs going, and our detainees hasn't gotten things in a long time. So I was like, just give him a call. Why reinvent the wheel? Unfortunately, we never did. But I just want to say, your sheriff is being very humble. He is one of the best things I've ever seen in corrections, and he was definitely missed when he left.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll give you the check on the way out. I paid a few more of you, so somebody else should be standing.
I know that as a leader, you depend on data a lot. You're very data-driven. You're always asking us to give you data. What do you think as far as leadership when people are making decisions? How much of that should they base on luck? Like you talked about having luck, but how much of it should be based on information?
You know, when someone says, you know, we're having more contraband come into our facilities, right. I'd rather see the numbers, the days of the week, the times, the tours of when this contraband is coming on than just a generic statement. You know, where are these inmates coming from throughout Suffolk County? What towns are they coming from? What zip codes are they coming from? Maybe we can target the school districts to try and help them with various programs that we created. You know, I think it's extremely important because now not only do we have the data, if we know that we have an influx of weapons coming in on a 3 to 11 tour in our Yaphank facility, I don't want any of my officers getting hurt. And so if we can target where it's coming in from, developing confidential informants, you know, is all ways of methods of not only keeping the jail safe, but also our staff safe. And, you know, I know sometimes, especially in the very beginning, it was like, oh, he wants more numbers. But, you know, for me, it's trying to get a better understanding of the picture that's going on because it's just not a report of we had an incident. There's a reason why those incidents are occurring, whether they're gang-related, whether they're street-related, whether they're personality-related, whatever the case may be. And the only way to do that and understand it is just through data, both qualitative and quantitative.
And even on a smaller level, like a sergeant on the floors in Riverhead could get the data what's going on their floor during a week and make decisions as a leader of that one floor, whereas you make them of the whole department. So right. I think that could really guide them, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. You know, one of the things that if you come into my Yaphank facility, there's a sign that says, my goal is to get to the kids before they get to me. And I'd rather be out in the community centers, in schools, on the basketball courts or ball fields, talking to young men and women about the issues that they're confronted with. And I think whether they're firehouses or senior facilities, you know, it's very important for all of us. And because whatever information I may glean from those conversations may help the police department, may help the probation department. Maybe I have to go to the town supervisor and speak to him because those are issues that our youth are facing. And I've learned a lot prior to COVID, going to 1 to 2 schools per week, talking to students about bullying, vaping, opioids, and gangs, or prior to COVID, and really getting involved with the community, get involved with community events. Because you know what, I mean, this is the one great thing about this position that I currently hold, is that I get to be with people, not only that I work with every day, interacting with the community, people that are incarcerated, that are in the same community I live in. That wasn't the case when I was in New York City because it's just so big. You really, you know, you do your job and you go home. But even when you're on the road or when you're home, you're still doing your job. Here, at least you get to meet people, you get to see faces, you get to talk to people, and there's a better understanding of what the sheriff's office does, and there's a better understanding of me of what's going on in that particular community.
So we worked together for some time, different organizations. So my question to you is, what advice would you give to leaders in various positions about influencing the culture of organizations that you've been in several in high-ranking positions and have had to lead or change cultures? What advice would you give to individuals about changing the culture of an organization?
You know, I think the first thing is to understand the organization. And then when you see those changes, I think you have to pick and choose what changes you want to make immediately, because there's some changes, it's like turning the Titanic around. And it's extremely slow going in trying to make these changes, you and I both know. So, you know, when I came into the sheriff's office, I try to prioritize the things. There's certain things I'm like, you know what, this isn't going to happen anytime soon. But then there's some things, you know what, I'm the boss, and this is the way it's just going to have to go. And if you don't like it, you know when you could do in 4 years. But, you know, I think that most men and women realize that, you know what, it's for the best of the organization. It's not an ego thing that I'm trying to impart on people. I don't want them, I'm not trying to change uniforms and protocols just to make myself feel good. I'm trying to keep everybody safe, make us more professional. People realize that there's a value to the men and women that work in the sheriff's office. And really, like I said, you know, some changes you're going to have to make slowly. Some changes you probably will never be able to make. And then some you can make rather quickly, and really understanding the process in the organization. I didn't come in to try and disrespect the sheriff's office and say, this needs to be done because this is the way we did it, and this needs to be done because this is the way we always do it. I wanted to see what was being done, and I just wanted to try and make that slow course a little differently and make it as painless for all of us. Thanks.
Any final questions? Sheriff, is there anything you'd like to finish up with?
Yes, I'm going to tell you one quick Yankee story.
Okay.
Most of the men and women in the sheriff's office has probably heard it. So, day before opening day in 1979, I had to get to the ballpark early to meet Pete Sheehy. And Pete Sheehy was a clubhouse man when Babe Ruth and Gehrig and DiMaggio and Mansell were there, and then Nick Priori, who was the assistant. So I go into the clubhouse, and I'm amazed as I describe the Yankee locker room. And I'm looking around, and all of a sudden, who walks in? Catfish Hunter. And I'm like, wow, Catfish Hunter. I'm thinking of Catfish Hunter from the early 70s with the Oakland A's with Sal Bando, Gene Tennis, Joe Rudy, Vida Blue. So I go to Nick Priori's assistant clubhouse guy. I go, Nick, how can I get Mr. Hunter's autograph? So he says, go in the ball bag, get a clean ball. Here's a pen, because they didn't have Sharpies back then. So I go up, get a clean ball. Nick gave me his pen. And I go over, and as I said, Catfish's locker is the last one before you go into the players' lounge. And I go up to him, excuse me, Mr. Hunter, my name's Errol Toulon Jr. I'm going to be a bat boy here with you this year. Can you please autograph this ball? I said, sure, kid. Takes the ball, goes, who do you want it autographed to? I said, my mom and dad, Errol and Alma. So he autographs it. And my heart's, I'm telling you, I'm ready to lose all bowel movements. My heart is pumping. I'm in front of Catfish Hunter. Gives me the ball, says, great meeting you, kid. I'll see you this season. I walk away, and I'm walking slow. My heart's beating. And he goes, hey, kid. And I'm like, shit, what did I do? So I turn around. I go, yes, sir. He goes, by the way, the name is Catfish to you, not Mr. Hunter. And I realized right then and there that I was going to be part of this team. Even though my position on the team wasn't as great as his, he made me, as a leader, because he was already, I think, a two-time World Series champion with the Oakland A's, he made a 17-year-old kid feel welcome. Thank all of you. God bless you, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.